to another Taylor Newsbreak. I'm Carl Zymak. Today our very special guest is the Honorable Judge Geno Salomone, head of Taylor's 23rd District Court. Judge Salomone is retiring at the end of the month, closing another chapter in Taylor judicial history. He has served on the District Court bench since he was elected in November of 2000. He was unopposed for re-election in 2006, 2012, and 2018, although that's only part of a much bigger story. The judge is featured on the cover of this month's Taylor Today magazine and in a story detailing his legacy of law and community service. It's an honor to have you here, Geno. Welcome.
Thank you, Carl. It's always a pleasure to sit down with you and we get to chat.
All right, let's jump in at the deep end here.
Okay.
Why are you retiring now?
The only answer I've been able to come up with is it's just time.
Okay.
I think I feel good about, there's no whispers out in the community about, it might be time for him to step aside. And I think it's also an opportunity while we're still, my wife and I are still young, still healthy, young being a relative term, but still healthy. Let's go visit some people we love and get to do some things that we haven't had the opportunity to do. We've been certainly blessed, and we're going to be in Taylor still. But it's time to try something else.
Pandemic reinforce or have anything to do with your decision?
It did not, and I'll explain why. The pandemic, from a judicial standpoint, all courts had to change the way they operate, as many businesses did. But I think with the courts, and our Chief Justice, Bridget McCormick, referred to that, is that obviously the pandemic's terrible for the community and the country, but it was something that the courts needed to make them change. So before, if you got a ticket, you came to my court, and most people are going to pay a ticket, but if you wanted to have a hearing, and you're taking 3 hours off of work. Now it's, I schedule you at a 15-minute block. You are on Zoom. You're doing Zoom from the workroom at your work, so you haven't lost any pay, and we're done in a half hour.
It seems like a lot of industries, governments, whatever, organizations have learned from the pandemic. I mean, there were certain things that we were forced to do that now you realize, that's not a bad idea.
I have told everyone there are things that I'm doing now that I should have been doing 10 years ago. It's better for the people who want to use the court.
Right, more efficient.
There's no doubt, and yeah.
Especially, when you're talking about district court, like you said, you can underscore a lot of these things because a lot of these people that you're dealing with, they're not horrible criminals. They want to pay a ticket. They want to do this. They may want to challenge something, but you can do a lot of these things electronically.
And you can. If there's a hearing where there's going to be several witnesses or a lot of documents, a trial, we do that in person. Sure. Everything else has the ability to be handled by Zoom.
Right, exactly. Well, before we get into the Geno Salomone story and embarrass the heck out of you, tell us about your replacement on the bench. I know you think very, very highly of new Judge Victoria Shackelford.
I do, and I got to meet her a few years ago. She is an assistant Wayne County prosecuting attorney, has handled homicides, arson, but she, prior to that, had been part of working in district courts and working on treatment courts, so familiar with all the things that are going to be very important to the safety of our community. One of the things that I found so comforting is as we went through this process of she's going to put her name in to be approved, to be put forth by the governor, she's talking to numerous judges and attorneys that I know and asking for support. And these were people that I trusted, that I knew would give me honest feedback. Not one had a negative thing to say about her. They all would tell me, Geno, this is the right choice. You have the right person. That was very reassuring. So, is
that a difficult process to go through?
To be appointed by the governor?
Yeah.
I think it's just nerve-wracking in the sense that the governor's calling you. But yeah, I've never had the experience. So for what she says, it turned out okay. Okay,
all righty, that makes sense. You want to be a lawyer since the 4th grade. This is kind of an interesting story. Why? Come on.
I just know that I've never ever had any other profession in mind since I was a kid. And I think it was I was exposed to lawyers. My dad was involved in unions and politics and exposed to lawyers. I always enjoyed history, and lawyers played a major role in any of the governmental historical decisions. So I thought it's just a natural fit. And everybody goes to law school thinking that this is a way I can make things better. Everybody does that. The trick is to hold on to that when you're 55 years old. Yes.
And it's not easy sometimes.
And it can be tough.
You know,
yes.
it can be distracting. You mentioned history. You a big reader?
Yes.
What's the last book you read?
Gosh, I'm trying to think now. What did I pick up a couple of months ago? I think on Churchill, and I'm trying to remember what the title was, but they all kind of blend in together. Yeah. You know.
I've got my daughter. I love history too. My daughter got me the three Winston Churchill, the trilogy. Those things are huge.
Yeah, they are huge.
I haven't
got
got through the whole thing yet because you go through. They're about 1,200 pages each, and there's 3 of them. So you kind of got to sit there for a while, and when you get distracted, it makes it very, very difficult.
I tried to do it with Caro's with Lyndon Johnson, having the 3 on it.
Right.
Can't get through them all. It's hard,
exactly.
but I'm hoping to. That's the other thing. Now that I'm retired, I have more time to look at these.
I hear you. I hear you. Going back, young Geno Salomone, your journey was not easy. Okay, you're not a silver spooner, and you didn't get things handed to you. Can you work us through that? You worked your way through school. You got married along the way. Tell me about it.
So it was graduating from Kennedy High School in '73, and my wife and I had dated in high school. We're still dating, and she went to work at the city. I was hired as a janitor at the school district, and I went to Wayne State, and we paid for my schooling, but I was working afternoons and midnights. So I went to school during the day. Karen worked during the day, and then when I went to law school, at that point in time, for some reason, there was this incredible decision to have children in law school, which is just not a real smart thing to do, but we did it. And so Karen was a major part of that, having to work, raise the children. I'm going to law school. But, while it's not a silver spoon, at the same time, these were good jobs that we had coming out of school, and was able to help pay. So that I wasn't borrowing money till I got into law school, and that was interesting to finally go to school and not work. I had never done that in my life.
Yeah, which was you must have been shocked.
I was, and I did. It was only lasted for a semester. After that, I went back to work.
After you were admitted to the state bar, okay, you worked in labor and public sector law for a long period of time, 16 years. Can you tell us about those days and what was rewarding? Was it rewarding work?
I loved representing school districts and cities. That was the most rewarding thing I did as an attorney because they're all entities unto themselves, and every day there's something different coming up. One day it might be there's a union contract that has to be taken care of. One day it might be a citizen has a major problem with zoning. There might be economic development going on. At a school district, you see the issues that are going on with school districts right now during the pandemic. There were just different issues at the time when I was being, and so there was always something going on that was different. You never knew what they were going to call you on.
Anything back then that really jumps out at you that you look back and say, wow, that was a unique deal that I was put on?
Well, one of the things I do remember is when one of my clients had to build a new high school, and we had to condemn some properties to buy that land. I would never do that again. I didn't like it. It was necessary. The community needed it, but I would have one of my associates handle it next time.
It's a little painful.
It is painful. You're taking somebody's home. And
exactly.
That always stands out to me. That's a bad thing. There were so many good things that happen when you get to work with a community and you get to see them grow.
I hear you. I hear you. After all those long days in college and then 16 years of practicing law, you made the run at the district court bench. What was going through your head back then? Why a Judicial Post?
Always active in the community, or always active in our kids' schools, and so being a judge is anybody in a profession you want to move up in your profession, and it's certainly at one of the top of the list. If a lawyer is, can you be a judge? Right. And it's challenging, but it also at that point in time takes a whole different direction. Now, you get to help parties resolve their problems, but you're also part of the community. Because a district court truly is, when you think of a people's court, that's a district court. The nature of the cases are you need to help people resolve things. These are not $3 million cases. These are cases that are worth $2,000. So to the people involved, it's a ton of money. But it also means it's not enough money for there to be appeals, to play a lot with the process, to go to jury trials. Hey, can we work out a resolution? And as a judge, you get the opportunity to do that when you can.
I hear you. Tell me about the experience of taking the place of Judge Tony Nacita. He and Judge William Sutherland are somewhat legendary in the history of the city. They were original charter committee members. They were the first judges in the history of the court. You find yourself replacing one and working with the other. That's
daunting.
That's daunting. Yes, daunting is the correct
Number one, they deserve to be legends, and number two, it was daunting. But at the same time, they were incredibly welcoming. Both of them, even though Tony wasn't going to be there anymore, and Judge Nocita, it was, I could call him and talk to him when I had an issue. Bill Sutherland came, when I took over, I had broken my leg the week before I was supposed to start. So I'm going to court in a cast and crutches, but Bill Sutherland would come to see me every morning and say, you have any questions? So they were incredibly welcoming, they were incredibly helpful. So the daunting part went away right away.
Okay.
And instead, I had them to draw upon their wisdom to help me learn how to be a better judge.
Nocita and Sutherland had to be two of the most influential professionals in your judicial career. What did you take from them specifically? You got anything that you can say, I took that from Judge Nocita, I took that from Judge Sutherland?
I think from Judge Sutherland, one of the first things he ever told me was, just remember the impact you can have. And if you're just in that 6 month, a year period, you changed a couple people's lives. He said it's well worth it. It's been a good job done, and he always maintained that. Let's see if we can make somebody better people.
Right.
Judge Nocita, you learned he had a reverence for the law. He's a true student of the law and an intellect, but he's also very compassionate. And so, how do I use that intellect to help people? And bring that, and both of them would tell you, remember about humility. We are basically big fishes in a little pond, you keep that in mind when you're acting every day.
Right.
Those are great lessons.
Those are great lessons.
They are.
They're very basic, but they're very, very great lessons.
And I think both of them would never have hesitated if they felt the need to say, hey, Geno, remember where you came from.
I hear you. I hear you. Who else helped you along the way?
I think the biggest influences, you and I have talked before, and the biggest influence would have been certainly my parents, my wife, and my in-laws. I look at them, my parents and my in-laws, totally different backgrounds and totally different upbringings, but always teaching the same lessons. And my wife has just been, she's a compass, and she keeps me going in the right direction, and knows when to say, you might be veering off course here.
Wives can do that.
But they truly have been the biggest influences about how to treat other human beings.
I hear you. I hear you. What's Geno Salomone's legacy, or what do you want people to remember about you?
God, if they say I was fair, even if they didn't win in my courtroom, that would be very nice. If the community has gained a sense of how do we deal with substance use disorder, we have seen that with the criminal justice system on a local level when people are engaged in nonviolent behavior. Violent behavior, you have to put them in jail.
Right.
You just do. You're trying to protect the public. But that's maximum 20% of the cases. The 80% of the cases that are nonviolent so many times are due to alcohol, drugs, lack of education. If we have addressed those and changed the community's mind on how to address those, that let's go treat these people as opposed to putting them in jail, that would be a nice legacy.
The whole idea of leveraging your reputation, position, to help find ways to improve the community. I found that very interesting when we were talking for the magazine story. The things that you left your fingerprints on, wide-ranging throughout the community. Let me name them off, and you talk about each one a little bit. Let's start with Goodwill Gardens.
I had an interest in gardening, went to a Rotary meeting my first year as a judge. Tony Nocita take me to Rotary, joined because Rotary is an incredible force of nature in this community. And Patty Donahue was there, and she was talking about gardens, and I said to Patty, hey, could we partner up? And that was the basis for the Goodwill Garden, because Tony Nacita had one for a time being.
Okay.
And it was a place to let community service workers go, do their community service, and then there's a contribution to the community there.
Right,
So,
right, exactly. And
yeah.
what you grow in the Goodwill Gardens, where's it go?
Half of it will go to food banks,
Okay.
and then half of it are plots that community people can rent for themselves. And it's a minimal amount, and a lot of them have been there for years, and they plant their own gardens. And it allows everybody to come through and look. And then we try and do some flowers, because that's always pretty.
And you swap stories and everything
Yeah,
else. I hear you.
so,
I hear you.
yeah.
Segue the Taylor Reading Corps.
I think that's where you and I met.
Mm-hmm.
We
Absolutely.
finally got to meet after all these years. I think
Yeah.
we'd heard about each other, and we got to meet because it meant it was a copy of the Detroit Reading Corps, and that had started with a group of volunteers in the Detroit Free Press. We had a group of volunteers, and we wanted to go with the News Herald.
Right.
And that was calling you, and you were all in from the
Oh,
beginning.
yeah, that was a lot of fun.
But
yeah,
it was, again, we go back to what causes crime in the community. One large factor can be a lack of education. If you can't read, I'm not even sure you learn enough or formulate enough to have the dreams about what do I want to do
Right.
in my life. One of the most devastating conversations I've ever had was talking to a 19-year-old person who had just been convicted. We were talking about probation. What do you want to do? And I said, what do you dream about? She said, I don't have any. And I said, that shouldn't be. You're 19 years old.
Right.
The world should be your oyster.
Right.
How do we get somebody there? You teach them how to read as the first step.
Right.
When you and I like history,
Yes, exactly.
how do you learn about history and not repeat those mistakes? If you
Right.
can't read,
Right.
and you knew right away, I'm in. That's good.
Well, and that there's no doubt, because I think some people look at this as all these subjects as separate, but if you can't read, you literally cannot function in any subject.
Well said. I agree, and well said. Okay.
Yeah. The Taylor Conservatory and Botanical Gardens has turned into one of the gems in Taylor,
is.
much less downriver. Tell us about it.
I get a call one day from Larry Wright, who is involved in Rotary. He's sitting with Jim Riddle, who was the assistant to the
Okay.
mayor at the time.
Right.
And they said, Geno, I'm sitting in my office, I get this call. Geno, you do the community garden. We want to build this conservatory over at the park. And the first question I had was, what the hell is a conservatory? And then they explained it to me. And I thought, Larry was the leading force behind it at that time, because he knew from the Bloomfest down at Coble Hall that DTE had this structure they wanted to get rid of. We were going to go up against some pretty high-end communities,
Okay.
but I was all in, because I thought we thought about that if we build this, if we put a beautiful patio and maybe some flowers,
Sure.
it would be wonderful.
Sure.
We beat out these other communities. The city was all in helping us out, and then we went to a designer and said, can you just design us a garden? And he came up with $1 million proposal. Only, I think about 30% of it has ever been
Okay.
finished.
Okay.
But it was this dream and vision he had that truly then made it. We were talking about maybe just some pavers, forming a patio. He came up with bluestone and boulders so that our grandchildren will see this thing and say, yeah, Grandpa had a part in this. But that was and it became, like everything else that you and I have been involved in, a community project.
Larry Wright and Jim Riddle, two of probably the most underrated names in maybe his city's history. When it comes down to the things that they have either currently with Larry, because he never stops,
Exactly.
or previously with Jim, they have their hands in a lot of things.
They do. They do.
And it's really amazing. I know Larry he never stops. He's always looking to improve. Fascinating guy. Really
always
credit to
doing.
the
In fact,
community.
he's president of Rotary
Yes,
again.
exactly,
And
exactly.
then Patty Donahue was the third part of that.
Oh yeah, Patty's
Went to Patty and
fantastic.
said, Patty,
Right.
we want to build a conservatory and a garden, and this just,
I hear you.
yeah.
Tell us about the farmers market.
Oh, that was so. My wife was an active role in that. She had, and we're foodies. We love gardens, and so this farmers market movement was starting. Karen was working with, I believe, the Wayne Metro Community Action Agency and working on some of their community gardens,
Right.
and it was just let's try and bring one to Taylor. And so it was absolute fun. Again, we went to reach out to the community. So people like Guido Hewlin,
Oh, sure,
the city was
sure,
there,
sure.
Nicole Hewlin. I mean, all these people helped out, and we started, and Patty was involved, and we just, it was funny, I would go to markets and just cold call, look at a farmer and say, would you like to come to Taylor? Or I went to Avalon Bakery in Detroit and said, would you like to come to Taylor?
That's the way it goes.
And then one day my wife looked at me and said, well, why don't we go to, I forget the name of the restaurant, they're famous for their Mexican food, and said, why don't we go see them?
Okay.
Off we went,
Right.
and they would say yes, and we brought them in, and it became a great success those first 2 years.
You probably ate really well, too.
Yeah, a little too much. Yeah,
The
so I felt this
recruiting
obligation
side.
that I had to support the vendors. Yeah,
What about court in the schools?
that's simply a matter of how do we get the students to understand that court, especially a district court, shouldn't be something you're afraid of.
Right.
You're probably going to get a ticket at some point in your life, you know, how to handle that. But there's other matters too. It also opened the door so that when we would go to the school, take about 8 cases, real cases, and I would talk to the defendants ahead of time and say, listen, I'm going to give you a break on your sentencing because you're going to humiliate yourself in front of a bunch of school kids. So there are seniors and juniors in high school. But it opened the door to have the talk not only about drugs and alcohol, but domestic violence, of looking at the young women at the high school and telling them this is what starts when you're dating someone who doesn't want you to talk to your friends, who tells you your parents don't know what they're talking about, who wants to show you how to wear a dress or how to wear your makeup. That's called control, and that person is not looking out for your best interest. And interestingly, we talked about domestic violence on a couple of occasions at the request of some of the school kids. And afterwards, I would inevitably have a young lady come up to me and say, you know, what should I do? And we'd give her the resources to say, here's who you call.
That's interesting. That's really, really interesting.
So court in school was a good way to bring these issues and let them talk to somebody, and it's not intimidating.
What about the regional treatment court?
So the first year I'm on the bench, in that first 6 or 8 months, I see a grandfather, a father, and a son. All of them on separate cases. And I remember going down to the probation department and asking our probation supervisor, how do we break this cycle? Because I'm assuming that happens in a lot of families. She said, have you ever heard of drug courts? And I said, I've heard the term. What do you want to do? And so the Michigan Association of Treatment Court Professionals was having, it might have been like their second conference or third conference down in Detroit that March of 2002. I went to that. My first treatment court was myself, a probationer, and my probation officer, and I just sat down next to him and said, let's talk. So I didn't know a whole lot about addiction, and there was a lot to learn. And then as it progressed, so today we have 53 people in our treatment court program, but as it progressed, I realized what an incredible problem it was. And it's been the most rewarding thing I've done as a judge.
Fantastic. I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to put you on the spot anyways. Among the programs that we've talked about here, do you have a favorite and why?
Yeah, it is the
That's
treatment
the
court.
favorite,
It is.
yeah,
It's just because it's, number one, it's the most challenging.
Right.
But the reward, when you see someone who came into your program who was homeless, who was suffering from addiction, who had not seen their son in 2 or 3 years, and now, a short time later, 18 to 24 months later, they have a job where they received a promotion, they're in a supervisory position, they have an apartment, they have a car with insurance, and their son lives with them. That's the kind of story that gets repeated time and again. Their whole outlook on life is so different. So while treatment court isn't perfect, and some people may slip up a little bit afterwards, the changes you see in those people who go on and live a rewarding life, you can't help but say, I like doing this. Yes, it is. Yeah, you enjoy doing it.
Any other new campaigns that you're planning in the future?
If you're talking about political campaigns, the answer is no. If you're talking about adventures, I am sure that my wife Karen and I will be involved in some type of nonprofit, whether it be a food bank, whether it be a literacy program. Certainly going to continue being involved with Families Against Narcotics.
Okay.
So those things are near and dear to us.
District judges always have the pulse of a community, okay? And for that matter, the nation, okay, when you take them all. What positive trends are you seeing out there that you're that you can be proud of or that you can relate to the audience?
I think in our community, the positive trend has been, I think people take a different outlook, as I referred to before, on criminal justice, that they understand that jail is not the answer. When you're talking about people that come through a district court program, and I think they grasp it. When we formulated the treatment courts, I remember going to a council meeting because I needed funding, and I was worried that because there's a stigma. Let me get this straight. You want us to spend all this money on drug addicts. That stigma's out there.
Yeah, exactly.
It was exactly the opposite. The council said, we are so glad you want to reach out and help those people.
Wow.
Because I think, and I should have known, all of us have somebody in our family close to us that has gone through these issues.
Sure.
And so it was always this unanimous support of, let's deal with that. And I think that's gone out to the rest of the community as you've dealt with an opiate and heroin epidemic. They suddenly realize that it's not about those people. Those people use drugs and things. No. It's us, and it applies to all of us. And it's a major issue that has to be done. I think the community in Taylor is more diverse now. I think it's kinder. Yeah. So
what about negatives?
I think I've always thought that downriver has a tendency, this is all the downriver communities, to underestimate their ability. When you look at Taylor, and all roads lead to Taylor, in the Tri-County area, they truly do. And you're so close to Ann Arbor and so close to Detroit. There is an incredible amount of opportunity and potential. And I think sometimes we all think, oh, well, we're not Ann Arbor or we're not West Bloomfield. Well, that might be economically, but that's where we start. So let's see what they do, and if they're doing it well, and if they are, then how do we get there? As opposed to, well, we're only going to do 1/3 of that. No, we are just as good as anybody in this state, and we need to remember that, and we need to work towards our goal. I think downriver communities really underestimate their ability to succeed.
Interesting. In your view, when you look at the system, okay, and I include the judicial system, the law enforcement arm, the prison system, what needs to change? You've been on the bench for a long time. You've been in this system for a long time. Do you see this, and this that would be key changes?
I think the change, whether it be let's treat substance use disorder as opposed to putting people in jail for addiction. When we talk about can the police be taught a different way of how to respond to a scene, you have groups police departments now that have experts that go to the scene of someone who's mentally ill, because that person's not going to understand what the police officer's ordering. There's a good chance that person's already had negative experiences with the police officer, because the police officer comes to arrest that person because they're acting in violation of the law. So you send somebody out to de-escalate that scenario. I think that change is there. It can be very controversial. People are trying to take both sides. It's still happening. We're learning there's a better way to change and address issues than punitive measures.
Is there too big a bullseye on police in general right now?
I think police can handle a lot more than what we give them credit for. Okay. And I am of the belief there's a lot of great officers out there. And so they're taking some pressure right now, but I think they can handle it. I think they're also trying to change. There's very few departments that I know of that say, oh, no, we're going to fight this, we're not going to change. Yeah, let's remember, police officers, like everybody else, change. We always, have a difficulty with. We all do that. Look how long it took me to change how I handled my court. It took a pandemic to say, Geno, you need to do this differently. Police officers are human beings, but I think they can handle what's coming, and I think they will change. I think it'll be better for all of us, and it'll hopefully is safer for the police officer at the end of the day.
Judges, by their very position, are somewhat non-political. Yet, in today's America, people seem to think the judiciary is becoming more and more political in nature. Is that fair? Is that fair?
I think it is a fair statement in the sense that when you see at this, it's there at some of the Supreme Court. I think in the past it would have been much more partisan at a lower level, circuit courts, district courts. I don't think that happens now. I think it's much more partisan when you look at a federal appeals court or Supreme Court level, that it's too easy to say you're a conservative or you're a liberal or you're a Democratic appointment. But at the same time, as we say that, I think the Supreme Court's the key. They need to do whatever they can to negate that image. Because as we talk about at the appeals court level, were you a Republican or Democratic appointee, we saw recently with the decisions on challenging elections. There's absolutely no factual evidence to support these elections.
Yeah, exactly.
And we saw people who were appointed by Trump rule that way and write these opinions that say there is absolutely no evidence, you should not be here. And so as I'm answering this question, I'm realizing I think it's just at the Supreme Court level that you see a split. It's based along philosophical lines that turn out to be also very similar to Democratic and Republican. And the justices need to be acutely aware of that, and I don't know that they are.
Yeah, it's a unique situation that they are in. That nine-member panel right now is in a very, very tough, pressurized position. Not, as if they're not always; they always are. But this is unique.
I think so too. I think it's from at least in our lifetime.
Right.
It's the first time we've ever seen the court being polarized. And people looking at it and saying, what are you doing? I mean, if you look at the Warren court from, I believe, the 60s, they were considered like more liberal, but never in the sense that this court is being treated as a potential to be treated as a conservative court.
It's almost as if there are some issues that force the hand of the court that are just never going to be reconciled. Something like abortion, quite frankly. I mean, if it was totally, if let's say Roe versus Wade was overturned or something, is that really going to solve any? Is that really going to solve the question? It probably isn't. It's just going to go on forever.
That issue will go on for a long time. But it's the court has to approach things as what is the law,
right?
And how do we apply that, even though sometimes it can be unpopular,
right?
And that's. They need to keep that in mind.
And in a lot of ways, as you mentioned, the test during the last election, during the certification verification process, I mean, all the courts, no matter who appointed these judges, were coming down with, hey, look, we're seeing what we're seeing. There. Yeah, exactly.
Which was a very comforting feeling to know that they had risen above the politics.
Right, exactly.
I mean, you're talking about you're a judge who was appointed by this president, and now you have to rule against him. That's exactly what's supposed to happen, depending on the facts.
Right.
If the facts are there, you rule in favor. If the facts aren't, you...
Disconcerting feelings that we had to go there. But hey, that's
so
another test of democracy.
Yes, it is, and so far it's been very successful.
What do you feel like you're going to do as a retiree? I know that you talked about maybe getting involved with some charities and things like that. What's first on your list?
I think first on the list is going to see some friends. It's deer season, so I get to go hunt, which is a big deal. I get to spend some time with some friends of mine. So we truly enjoy that.
Right.
But I think first to go see some friends and family, and then just I'm in a very fortunate position. I get to retire, and I have some income coming in, and I have some options open to me. So there's no pressure here. It's all good. And but no permanent plan. That's probably been the first time in my life where I'm doing something this important, leaving your career, and what's your next step. Not sure. I'm going to take it. But I'm blessed because I don't see any negative coming from that.
Sure.
I can make choices and I won't get hurt.
Exactly. Yeah. Before we sign off, I wanted to ask you if we had a bunch of young students here, a bunch of young people, what would you say to them? What are the words of wisdom after you've gone through your career, you've gone through the ups and downs, you're headed into retirement? What would you lend? What would you walk out the door saying?
I would encourage them to be a better student than I was. That if you're going to be in school and you're going to be doing something, then take the time to do it well. It will make a difference in the terms of what opportunities are available to you. It will make a difference in terms of how much you learn and grasp about what else is out there in the world. I would encourage them to keep an open mind about all sorts of issues. One thing you learn about as a judge, you truly do, you'll listen to one side and go, okay, this is a no-brainer. And then no, wait for the other side to have their day in court.
Right.
And then you hear the other side. Ah, now I get it.
Right.
So you have to keep that open mind. And then the final thing I would tell them is do good.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to spend 16 hours a week or work for free,
Mm-hmm.
but you need to do good, because that's what is at the core of our community and brings it together. Is when you reach out and treat each other in a good manner. You reach out with love.
I hear you. I hear you. Geno, it's been an honor to have you on the show, and it's been an honor to know you.
So
You're a great guy. Much success and good health in retirement. This has been another Taylor Newsbreak. Thanks to retiring Judge Geno Salomone for coming on. Something tells me that in the future we'll get you back.
Oh, we'll be talking.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure. Carl,
maybe in your deer hunting outfit.
That's not happening.
For Joey Camilleri and Samantha Rickard in the control room, I'm Carl Zymak. Have a great day, and we'll see you on another Taylor Newsbreak.